This week, on A Nice Cup of History Tea, we're kicking off our third season, and we're celebrating over 3,500 downloads, which is insane, by looking at another beloved fairy tale and its origins.
A story that has spawned multiple films, sequels, television series, plays and musicals. It is, of course, Beauty and the Beast. A story about a curse, a monster, a man, and that library of dreams.
Yes.
But is it all as it seems? Is Belle really the bold heroine full of books and gumption? Is the Beast really as Disney have shown us? Is Gaston even a thing?
And in this week's Ridiculous Death, we think what would happen if that drunk friend that just wants to hug you was a bear.
So, sit comfortably on your singing sofa, grab your favourite chipped chatty cup, fill it with tea, and let's get historical.
So, let's talk a little bit about the author first. Now, some sources will tell you one thing, but we've gone a little bit further back to find the original actual author. And there is a nod to the author in the latest version, or the live-action version.
Ooh,
and I'll explain that in a minute.
That's cool.
So stories about beautiful brides and beastly grooms have been in global folklore for as long as we've had folklore. There's always that notion that beauty tamed the savage beast, and that true love can break almost any curse.
The first written appearance of the tale that we have come to know as Beauty and the Beast was in 1740, called La Belle et la Bête.
It was part of a collection of short stories called Le Jeune Américain et le Conte Marin, or The Young American.
You're so good at sounding accents.
I'm trying. I hope I haven't offended anyone.
Sorry, I cut you up.
But it's cool.
Go again.
The translation is The Young American and Tales of the Sea.
Okay.
It was written and compiled by Madame Gabrielle Suzanne Barbeau de Gaillon de Villeneuve. And the nod is, in the live-action version, the village which Belle lives in is called Villeneuve.
I was going to say, I thought it was.
Yeah.
That's really cool. Details, man.
Details.
So, Gabrielle, as we're going to call her, because I'm not going to say all of the name.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
Yeah, she was born on the 26th of November in 1685 in Paris to a powerful family from the city of La Rochelle. She married Jean-Baptiste Galland de Villeneuve.
Nice.
For me, that was exceptional. They got married in 1706, but that didn't quite work out. Within 6 months, Gabrielle had requested a separation of belongings as her husband was not good with money, and by that point had already squandered a lot of his family's money.
Yeah. They did have a daughter, but we've got no records of whether or not the daughter survived. Record keeping during this time was fudgy at best, and with the later French Revolution, a lot of information was lost.
Yeah. In 1711, Monsieur Villeneuve died, leaving Gabrielle a widow at the tender age of just 26. Bit by bit, her remaining resources dwindled, and so she was forced to find employment or become destitute.
Her life path led her back to Paris, where she met the famous playwright Prosper Joliot de Crébillon. The pair hit it off, and she stayed with him for the rest of her life, helping him with his role as the Royal Literary Censor. This gave her an idea of what sort of things the public were reading, which would help her later as an author. Give the people what they want and all that.
Yeah. And as well as La Bête et la Bête, I got that wrong.
The Beast and the Beast.
La Belle et la Bête. Gabrielle Pollitt.
Oh,
here we go. We're trying.
Words.
Right.
New season, same problems.
I'm going to start again. As well as La Belle et la Bête, Gabrielle published a novella, 4 novels and 2 collections of fairy tales. Her most successful work, the novel La
Jardinière de Vincent,
was published in 1753 and was printed in no fewer than 15 editions between the years of 1751 and 1600s. 1800s. What the hell?
It's normally me that suffers with numbers.
I think I saw the 1800 and when my brain was like, time, it's obviously 6 o'clock. Between the years of 1751 and 6 o'clock.
So, in the...
one paragraph I messed up.
So, in the space of 49 years, or 9 minutes, she had 15 versions of her work edited and published, which is pretty damn good.
Yeah.
So, after her death on the 29th of December, 1755,
great day. Bad for her.
Well, yeah.
But the 29th of December, people who are born on that day are amazing.
Yes.
Except she can't read a sentence.
It's a great day, not for the person that died. After she died, her work did continue to garner attention, and in 1756, La Belle et la Bête was rewritten and abridged by another female author, Jean-Marie Le Prince de Beaumont. She's the one that's often credited for writing it. Hers version is the most commonly known one. Unfortunately, she never gave any credit to Gabrielle in her version.
What a bitch.
Which means that more often than not, she is cited as the original author of the tale, which, you're right, it isn't fair. So, that's the author. Now here's the story.
Are we ready? I'm going to try my hardest not to mess up another sentence.
It's fine. In fairness, you've not had a chance to read through this.
I mean, I have. I just haven't.
Dying inside.
Hey, I was in London yesterday and I didn't have the internet.
Fairness, and I only sent it to you yesterday, so that's cool.
Right, so Beauty and the Beast. Once upon a time, in a land so far away, we couldn't possibly show you on a map. Especially since we both gave up geography to study history, and we won't apologise for that. There was a great city. In this city lived a very wealthy merchant with a whole fleet of magnificent ships that took his goods all across the known world to trade, which he oversaw from a very grand mansion indeed.
The merchant had 6 sons, all too young to marry or start their own business yet, and 6 daughters, all too beautiful and therefore too proud to find a man who rivaled their fortunes enough to marry him.
But fortune is fickle, dear listener, and she turned on our poor merchant in the form of a very, very bad day.
Firstly, his house caught on fire, and the blaze was so hot and so fast that it consumed the house with time to save only the bare minimum of personal belongings.
Then he found out his magnificent fleet had either been shipwrecked or pirated.
Thirdly, all of his friends and investors withdrew from him and made him bankrupt. And finally, the agency engaged across the world to help with the movement of his goods all betrayed him and went to other merchants. In a word, he lost everything in the short space of time, and our poor merchant and his 12 children were suddenly destitute.
I mean, as bad days go,
That is pretty bad.
that's not great.
That's like one thing after another. That's like being repeatedly punched by the day.
Yeah. You just have to think, if you're having a bad day...
At least you're not the fictional merchant. With his fictional bad day.
All he had left was a simple country cottage several miles away from the city that they knew. It wasn't much, but it was now home. The girls held out hope that their beauty would still entrance their way to good marriages, but they soon found out that their father's former fortune was their greatest attraction when, one by one, their suitors and then their friends all drifted away from them.
Oh, so fickle.
Innit, mate?
The family were forced to work to survive. Terrible. They worked the land and grew crops to look after other animals. The girls took this harder than the boys, ruining their delicate little hands on manual labour. How dare they?
How rude.
All, that is, except for the youngest girl, Little Beauty.
Aww.
That was her name. Because, nothing says on the nose like naming your child after what she looks like. She was sad at first, obviously. House was on fire, family lost everything, really not good. But she soon bucked up and she pitched in while she worked, and she tried to spread cheer amongst her brothers and sisters. The brothers were fine with this, they really liked her. The sisters thought she was silly to be so happy when she should be really miserable. She was singing and she was working and she was smiling all the time.
Oh, how gross.
She was even weaving flowers into her perfect hair that made her even more beautiful. I mean, what a bitch.
How? The audacity.
Every time someone says it, I just think of that clip of the Grinch. The audacity.
Yep. I mean, when you said about naming your girl after the thing that you look like, I was thinking about what you and I would be called, and I really had to stop myself from laughing. Obviously, the stunning and the breathtakingly beautiful.
Yes, Beauty and her friend Gammyfoot.
Which one of us has the gammy feet? You shall never know, people of listening. What?
I'm pretty sure they know it's me.
People of listening.
People of listening.
Oh, let's just get back to it,
tiny
shall we?
little village of listening.
So,
in this town of Ayrshire.
Season 3, what a start. So, from when she, weaved flowers into her perfect hair, being all happy and a bitch, 2 years passed. So they were getting used to this new way of life, when suddenly something came up that might help make them wealthy again.
Woo!
The father heard about one of his ships, thought wrecked, that had shown up at a port full of the cargo.
The daughters wanted him to leave at once to go and check this out because absolutely they would be rich again. The father was a bit more reluctant to get his hopes up because he thought that, by the time he got there, people might have taken charge of it and sold it and everything, so he didn't know what he was going to. But he still agreed that he would leave as soon as possible to get to the port.
The daughters didn't moderate their excitement though, and asked their father for all sorts of gifts that they could use when they were taken back to wealth and status. We're talking jewellery, clothing, headdresses, each getting more and more ridiculous with the costs of everything they wanted.
But when the father turned to Beauty, she simply asked to see him come back to them in full health. The sisters weren't impressed by this and called her silly and childish, but their father was touched and he begged her to choose something for herself that he could bring back.
So, and be shocked, Carrie, she asked for a single rose.
Aww.
Because it had been so long since she had seen one. That way, she obeyed her father, and she didn't cost him anything. Or so she thought.
She cost him everything. Sorry. Spoilers. So, the day came and the father left. He raced to the city and found his ship, but it wasn't good news. His business partners, not having heard from him for 2 years, believed him to be dead, and they had already taken the goods from the ship and sold them off, just as he feared. This meant he had to go through all sorts of legal gumph to try and get them back, but by the time he did get the profits, he had to spend so much in legal fees that he wasn't really any better off.
To add to it, when he was heading home, a horrible snowstorm started up, leaving him fully exposed, and sure that he would die in the cold. He pressed on and it started to get late, but he was nearly home, so he didn't want to stop. All he needed to do was cross through the dark forest.
He came upon a large, hollow tree and decided to use that as shelter from the storm. The snow was starting to pile up and his horse was struggling, but that didn't help his nerves as he found himself shivering in the cold and jumping at the sound of every animal passing by. The night seemed like it was never going to end.
When, at last, the sun did come up, it wasn't any comfort as he saw that the snow around him was so deep there was no way he could see the path through. He led his horse carefully, stumbling and tiring easily until eventually he found a path and followed it.
If you can hear a noise in the background, by the way, that's the dog pattering across the wooden floor.
Yeah, I like to think it adds to the atmosphere.
Yeah. The path, it's like our own little sound effects.
Isn't it?
Yeah. The path led him at length to a beautiful palace, seemingly untouched by the snow, with gorgeous gardens full of orange trees with the fruit ripe. There were statues dotted around with no apparent order or symmetry, all life-sized and painted to be realistic. There were statues of courtiers, staff and warriors, more and more with each courtyard he passed through, but the father was too cold to stop and get a good look.
Entering the main building, he found himself at the bottom of a staircase made of agate, a type of quartz stone, and gold. He walked through different rooms, all lovely and warm, and he could feel life returning to his limbs again. He was incredibly hungry, but there didn't seem to be anybody about that he could speak to. He called out a few times, but there was only silence. Silence and statues.
He finally came to a room with a large open fire, which he assumed had been prepared for a member of the household, so he decided to wait for them and warm himself up. But tiredness overtook him and he drifted off to sleep.
Eventually, the hunger cramps in his stomach woke him, and he opened his eyes to see a large table full of food. Still not seeing anyone, he called out a thank you to the empty room as he tucked in. When he was full to bursting, he sat back and waited for his host to appear, but still nobody came. He called out again, but still nothing. Once again, he drifted off to sleep, this time falling into a deep sleep full of food and warmth and goodness, like Christmas Day.
Yeah, he fell into a food coma.
He did.
When he awoke again, the table was once more set, but this time with cakes and liqueurs and pasties? No, pastries. I mean, there might have been pasties as well, but probably pastries. But still no host. Again, he called out his thanks and again tucked in. I mean, it's free cake, wouldn't you?
Oh, definitely.
Yep. Don't get a body like this by refusing free cake.
Exactly. I mean, I'm happy.
Yep.
Eventually, though, he did become concerned about the lack of anybody else. So he decided to get up and go searching for them so he could thank them for saving his life. But he couldn't find anyone. No host, no servants, nothing. In his mind, an idea formed that the palace was inhabited by some spirit or god that had decided to gift it to him. So he went around and started to take all the treasures he could carry, looking in at the bedrooms and earmarking them for each of his children on their return.
Because that's exactly what you do when you find an abandoned house that, you know, there seems to be somebody inside but you're not entirely sure. Just think, you know what? It's mine now. Finders keepers.
My house.
Mine. He left the palace, eager to get back to his children and to tell them the good news, and went to his horse, who had conveniently found a little stable area and some hay to munch.
Oh, that's convenient.
Yeah. Taking the reins, he started to leave, but then he was stopped by the sight of an alley covered in the most beautiful, heavily perfumed roses he had ever seen. Remembering his little beauty, he picked one. He was about to reach up and pick more to make a full bouquet when he heard a roar.
At his side was a terrible beast, tall and grotesque, with a large trunk that he wrapped around the father's neck as he roared at him.
Who gave you permission to gather my roses? Is it not enough that I allowed you to remain in my palace, that I fed and warmed you? Instead of gratitude, you steal from me. This must be punished.
I mean, he's got a point.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, you know, he fed this guy, he gave him warmth, he saved his life, and in return, he steals from him.
Yeah.
Rude.
The father whimpered and begged to be let go, insisting he meant no offence by it, but the beast was having none of it. I don't care what you thought. I am a beast, and you will not escape the death that you deserve.
Maybe death is a little bit harsh. Maybe. Also, note the presence of a trunk.
Mm-hmm.
The Disney ones do not have a trunk.
That means trunk as in like an elephant's trunk?
Yeah, like that's actually how it's described in the book.
Oh.
He has an elephant's trunk that he wraps around the man's neck and lifts him off the ground. So, it's got dark. The father, having nothing more to lose at this point, tried to explain that the rose was for his daughter, Beauty, and he told the beast everything that had happened in the hopes that it would make him feel sorry for him. I mean, all you need to do is tell him about that really bad day.
The beast thought about it for a moment, and then agreed to pardon the father, but on one condition. He was to bring one of his daughters to take his place, because he still demanded justice. The father was shocked. How could the beast ask such a thing? How could he trick his own daughter into coming to such a place, to such a creature? But the beast insisted and couldn't be tricked. He had to be honest, and the daughter had to know exactly what she was walking into.
That's fair.
Fair one.
So the father gave his word that he would go back and he would talk to his daughters, and if not one of them was brave and willing enough to come back, then the father himself would have to come back. But the beast warned him not to try any trickery, because he would know. He shouldn't presume to ride away and never come back, because the beast will find him and destroy him. The man accepted. I mean, what choice did he have? He wanted to leave straight away, but the beast insisted that he stayed for the night and rested after his fright, and his horse would be ready to go in the morning.
I mean, he goes to two extremes. One, he's actually quite a nice, quite a caring, sensitive beast. And then he's like, death.
He's a touch mercurial, yes. Yeah.
I just want to apologise now if you hear snoring. The dog has fell asleep on me.
And not just on her, he's kind of half propped up against the pillow, upright against her arm. He's a dachshund, he's only a little dog.
And he's snoring.
Yes.
So apologies if you hear snoring now.
There may be a photo of him just kind of included randomly in with the podcast.
I mean, he does look cute, doesn't he?
Yeah. Beauty, the Beast and Dudley.
Right. So, the father gave his word that he would go back and talk to his daughters. I was testing you, you passed, well done, I'm proud of you. So, the pair went back inside with the beast walked to the father through to the room with his big fire, and then he vanished. A great supper was laid out, and though he was still frightened half to death, the father ate. I mean, yeah.
It's free food.
I bet it was good as well.
Yeah, it would be good. And I bet they had the grey stuff.
I bet it was delicious.
Yeah. Don't believe me? Ask the dishes. Anyway, when he finished, the beast appeared again and reminded him of his promise that he clearly only made less than an hour ago and was probably still terrified about, insisting that the father take breakfast before he leaves in the morning. Because, you've got to feed your victims.
He really is starting to fatten him up.
Yeah. But that he's not to leave his bedroom until he hears a bell ringing. So he can come down for breakfast only after he's heard the bell ring. He told the father that he could take a single rose for Beauty, might as well, and bid him good night.
Even though the bed was comfortable, the father couldn't sleep. worrying about what he had agreed to. When the bell rang and he had eaten breakfast, he left, stopping only to gather the rose for Beauty on his way out. He found his horse and sped off, thinking hard and having a stern internal debate about what he should do on the way. He determined that he would never ask this of his daughters and turned his horse around, but he couldn't find the path back to the palace, so he had no choice but to turn and head home.
As the merchant reached home... I went too far. As the merchant reached home, he'd pretty much resolved that he wouldn't speak to his daughters about the deal. His own horse had bolted the night before and had found its way home, so the family was in a bit of a panic when he got there, though they didn't recognise him at first on the magnificent horse that the beast had given him. So they're like, oh my god, his horse is here, where's Dad? What's happened? Oh my god, hang on, who's this stranger on this magnificently caparisoned horse coming towards us? Oh, it's Dad.
I love that. He had determined not to tell anyone, but still felt the need to guilt-trip Beauty when he handed her the rose by saying, "There is what you have demanded of me, but you will pay dearly for it, as will the others." I mean, bit of a dick.
Yeah, he's not exactly Father of the Year through this, I will tell you.
This made the others curious and the sisters jealous that Beauty seemed to be the only one getting a gift, so the father decided to tell them everything. So he decided not to tell them, had a little dig at Beauty for wanting a rose, and thought, I'm going to tell him anyway.
Yep. It's great.
What a man.
Sterling. The daughters sobbed, mainly because they were actually still poor. The sons vowed that their father would never go back to the beast if they could help it, and they even vowed to seek and kill the beast.
Kill the beast!
But their father put his foot down. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
He'd given his word, and he would rather die than break his word.
The brothers decided to offer themselves up one by one, but their father said no. It had to be one of the daughters. But the daughters all exclaimed it's unfair that they should be victims to Beauty, punished because of her request. Beauty was almost reduced to fainting by her grief and sadness, knowing that she was the cause of their misfortune. But her sadness soon turned into resolve.
So sad, must faint. Ah. I will risk my life to release my father from his fatal engagement. I will go to find the beast, too happy in being able to die in order to preserve the life of him from whom I received mine, and to silence your murmurs. So it's basically like, I will be happy to die if it will shut you up. Pretty much. The only thing she asked was that her sisters would stop having a go at her for the next month about this. Needless to say, nobody argued the point. Sterling family she's got there.
Yeah, that's nice.
Like, yeah, sure, you can go to die. That's cool.
Only the father wouldn't consent to this, as he'd seen the beast, but the others told him off for his protest, saying that he only loved Beauty and not them, despite her causing all of this pain.
Apparently guilt trips run in the family.
Yeah, right. He gave in to peer pressure, great dad, and agreed to sacrifice his 16-year-old daughter to a terrible beast in return for a single rose.
Sorry, Dilly.
Beauty kept her spirits up over the next month and tried to speak of it as a happy adventure that she was going on, even though she was terrified, even though the father and sons talked about strangling the horse at one point to stop her from leaving.
Because, the beast said that he would know and nothing would stop him, so yeah, sure, let's strangle the horse, because what's the horse ever done to you? Jerks. Poor Philippe. Sorry, unnamed horse. Finally, the time came, and both Beauty and her father set out, he on his old horse, and she on the one the beast had given. The father tried to persuade her several times over not to go through with it, but she didn't listen.
Night fell, but the horse didn't lose its way, and eventually they came to a clearing in the forest, where suddenly hundreds of fireworks started going off around them. That's a bit concerning. They continued forward until they came into the orange grove, at which point the fireworks stopped suddenly. Not creepy at all.
Yeah, I don't know what's more concerning, the fact that, you arrive at a place and there's pew 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 fireworks everywhere, all of a sudden they stop.
It wasn't dark though, because all of the many statues around the gardens were now holding torches, and lamps were arranged in intricate patterns around the entrance to the palace. So he tried to make it pretty.
Yeah, but if the statues are what you're meant to think the statues are, he's basically walked around shoving torches in the hands of people that are now statues.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why not? They dismounted and they went up the steps, the father leading the way into the palace because obviously he knows the way, and he led her into the salon where he'd rested before. The candles and fire were lit and a delicious feast was again laid out for them. Together they sat down and ate what they thought would be Beauty's last meal, looking at their splendid surroundings.
After the meal was finished, the beast appeared, being heard by the sound of his scales and claws on the marble flooring long before they saw him. The father clung tightly to Beauty and cried out in fear, but she released herself from his grip and stepped forward towards the beast, swallowing her own terror and trying to look resolved, even going so far as to wish him a good evening.
I'd like to think that, it was one of those moments where she thought her voice was stronger than it was, and it was more like
Or in the Disney version, they go, "Step into the light."
Yep. I love that film. Stockholm Syndrome. Anyway, the beast looked at her and asked if she'd come of her own free will, and if she planned to let her father leave without trying to follow him. Beauty said that she had, and that she would not, which pleased the beast. She obviously had something about her that he found impressive.
Gumption.
Gumption, yeah, I like that word.
I know.
The beast instructed Beauty and her father to go to the wardrobes and choose whatever fine garments, jewels and other items would please her brothers and sisters, allowing them to fill 2 trunks with them. But when that was done, the father was forbidden to ever return to the palace, and Beauty was to remain with the beast. So he hasn't actually, at this point, he hasn't mentioned killing her.
Which is what the father has assumed.
Yeah.
The beast bid them good night and left them to their tearful goodbyes. The father tried to persuade Beauty to leave with him, despite the commands of the beast, but she refused. She had given her word and she would remain. They retired to bed, each left along with their own thoughts.
The next morning they set about filling the trunks with clothing, but then Beauty discovered a room full of gold coins. Telling her father to empty the trunks, she bid him fill them with gold, as that would be more useful to the family than clothing. The father did still keep some fancy clothes back, though, because he knew it would please his daughters.
The trunks were far too heavy, though, and the father started to despair, thinking that the beast was doing it to mock them, as there was no way he could carry them home. But Beauty told him to wait, and instead they went down to breakfast, trusting that their trunks would be sent onward to the house by the beast, which they were.
Yeah. We will come back to what happened to those trunks later. The father and Beauty finished breakfast and said one last tearful goodbye before he rode off into the sunset, or technically sunrise because it's the morning.
But still, it would have been pretty.
Yeah.
So, during her last month with her family, Beauty hadn't slept well at all, whilst thinking on her fate, obviously. So, as soon as she said goodbye to her father, exhaustion set in, and she decided to nap. As she slept, she fell into a dream that she was standing on the bank of a river, surrounded by orange trees and blooming flowers.
She breathed in the perfume of the dream flowers and began to cry about her situation. As she cried, she heard a man's voice asking her softly not to cry. The voice told her that she would not always be so unhappy, and that she would soon get what she deserved in life if she would help him to rid himself of his disguise. She turned to face a man more handsome than any she had ever seen.
He knelt before her, telling her that he loved her tenderly, and everything she would want would be hers if she would only not judge and not allow herself to be prejudiced by appearances.
For 5 hours she slept, and for 5 hours she travelled from dream place to dream place with the handsome stranger. But when the time came for her to wake, she remembered it as a pleasant dream and nothing more.
She dressed and went down to a fully laden dinner and tried to think on the dream that had left her with a warm, fuzzy feeling. How can she help the handsome stranger? Maybe the horrible beast had him as a prisoner too. But soon she dismissed it as a dream and nothing more, and set about exploring the palace.
Every room held a new delight, more beautiful than anything she had seen before, and in many of the rooms hung portraits that looked uncannily like the man she had seen in her dreams. But still she moved on until she came to the library.
The library. And that's it. It was big and fancy, and she thought she could study in it. The library gets a paragraph, honestly.
The first time I read this version of it, I died a little bit inside. I mean, how could you ignore that library? How? I mean, that's the focal point. That is the best part of the Disney films. The moment she walks into a library,
They make it like a really big thing, don't they?
100%. I would be more than happy to stay with a man who would give me a library like that.
Yeah. Definitely.
So, she saw that library, moved on from the library, blah blah blah. Ugh. Anyway, she ran out of time to see everything in one day, and, with the light failing, Beauty returned to the salon to see that her supper had been served, and again she ate alone, but she was kind of getting used to this now. Once she'd finished, the beast appeared and greeted her politely, asking her about her day and how she'd been keeping herself amused.
Together they talked for an hour or more, and Beauty began to realise that his voice was only gruff, because that was the nature of the voice of a beast, but the words were soft and curious, the conversation pleasant. That was, of course, until he proposed to her.
Far from being delighted, she was terrified by the proposal, so he asked her, calmly, to simply answer yes or no. Obviously, she said no, and he bid her good night and left, no doubt choking back beastly tears.
Obviously.
Beauty retired to bed, realising that her answer hadn't caused a violent response from the beast.
As she slept, once again, the handsome young man appeared to her, and together they passed the night. As soon as she was awake, Beauty ran to the picture gallery to find his portrait and stood for a while, staring at the portrait of, quite literally, the man of her dreams. Shaking herself for a while, she decided to explore once more.
The weather was good, so she decided to explore the gardens, walking between the orange trees and beautiful flowers, realising that they were the same ones she'd seen in her dreams with the young man. This determined her more to the thought that the beast was keeping the young man prisoner, because there's clearly no other explanation there.
After a while, Beauty decided to explore inside again, finding all manner of wonderful and beautiful things, including a gallery full of rare birds, all singing beautifully. Beauty was delighted and lamented out loud that it was a pity that it was so far away from her bedroom, because she would love to hear them singing. So imagine her surprise when she opened the next room and found herself in her own apartment. Magic castle, eh?
Yep. But it'll happily move to suit you.
I would like that. I'd be sat here and be like, oh, I really wish a donut was next to me right now.
Bing!
Oh no.
She continued her exploration, finding rooms with more birds, including parrots, and one parrot that asked her for a kiss. Cheeky sod. She stayed and chatted to the parrots for a bit because she was starved of company until the beast showed up for their post-dinner chats.
The next room was full of monkeys and apes, dressed up in various forms of courtly dress, and, when she asked them to accompany her, a small number did, acting as pages and servants for her and lending her to supper. As she ate, birds sang for her, whilst the ape servants waited on her every need. Then, when she was finished, they directed her to a seat where yet more monkeys performed a play for her, with surprising skill, the words spoken by hidden parrots.
When all this was done, the beast appeared and they spoke of her day, and as he had the night before, he ended the conversation with a proposal, which, as she had the night before, Beauty declined. He bid her good night and left her. The female apes then helped Beauty back to her chambers, where they assisted her in undressing for bed, leaving the window open slightly so she could hear the soft singing of the birds next door to lull her to sleep.
For many days this routine continued. By day, Beauty would be entertained by the birds and the apes, the parrots translating for her what the apes were saying in response to her questions. Each night the beast would appear after dinner, they would talk, the conversation always ending with a proposal, which she would always decline. But she found herself not objecting to his company, and the conversations were pleasant enough. If only she didn't have to endure the nightly proposals.
She was tempted each night to ask the beast about the handsome man she continued to see in her dreams, with whom she was now fully infatuated. But she knew the beast was now in love with her, and it wouldn't really be fair to ask him about another man.
See, that's fair, that's nice.
Yeah, I get that, I appreciate that.
After having fully explored the palace, she returned to one room that seemed dark. She opened a window, but that only opened out onto an enclosed courtyard and provided very little light. Suddenly, a bright light appeared out of nowhere, showing a very heavy curtain that was rising as she watched. What looked like a model theatre appeared before her, full of people in the seats and boxes, people that appeared to be moving. As she watched, human actors appeared on stage and acted out a wonderful tragedy before her eyes. The sound so clear as though she were among them. She reached out to touch the model, but realised she couldn't. What she was seeing wasn't a model, but an image in a mirror.
Struck by what she had seen, she went out into the gardens to walk and think. That night the beast appeared again and asked her about her day, and she told him about the wonderful mirror. He was pleased that she liked it and told her that she was so beautiful that whatever she wished for, she would have. Again he proposed, and again she said no, and then they each went to bed.
That night she saw the handsome man in her dreams, but she was troubled. She confessed to the man that she was worried one day the beast would propose, she would say no, and his patience would wear thin and he would attack her. But she admitted she couldn't love the beast, as she only had room in her heart for the man in her dreams. She simply smiled and replied to her, "Love him who loves you. Do not be misled by appearances, and release me from prison." But still, she didn't get it. I mean, really?
Mm-hmm.
The man even changed her dream so she saw an image of the beast seated on a throne of jewels, asking her to sit beside him. But the man appeared and swapped places with the beast on the throne. Then a black veil appeared to cover the man and wrap his voice into something beastly and horrible, but oddly familiar.
I mean, seriously.
She's stupid!
She woke up completely confused by the absolutely inexplicable nature of her dreams. What could they possibly mean?
Oh no! She passed the day in occupying herself until returning to the magic mirror, this time to watch a magnificent opera. She then opened another window in the room and discovered that the image in the mirror changed, so she could see the market of the town of Saint Germain, watching the people come and go, seeing some of those from the open audience on their way home.
Yet more days passed in this manner. By day she would explore the palace, read in the library, watch the play and the activities in the market. In the evening she would have supper and then the daily conversation and proposal from the beast, followed by happy and yet vaguely confusing dreams with the man she was now fully in love with. Eventually, though, she began to tire of this routine and decided to ask the beast one night if he and she were the only two people in the palace. The beast assured her that yes, they were. He seemed rather excited by this question and left her abruptly that night, meaning she could dream sooner. But Beauty didn't want to dream. The beast's answer meant that the man was clearly a figment of her imagination, and the wonderful palace that she thought held him too was now a prison, maybe even a tomb.
That night in her dream, the man appeared to find her sobbing. When he asked why, she told him of her feeling trapped. The dream changed and she saw the man ready to kill the beast, but she cried out to stop him. She loved the man with all her heart, but the beast had given her everything and, at heart, he was kind to her. She cried out that she would rather die than see the slightest harm come to the beast.
I mean, apparently the beast isn't the only one that's a bit mercurial here. At that, the man and the beast vanished in place of a beautiful older woman who smiled at Beauty and told her to have courage. Be the model of female generosity. Show yourself to be as wise as you are charming. Do not hesitate to sacrifice your inclination to your duty. You are taking the true path to happiness. You will be blessed, provided you are not misled by deceitful appearances. Beauty woke at this and lay there thinking on what this could possibly mean. I mean, honestly. She then thought about how she got there, about her father and how much she missed him, and as she went about her day, she thought on him more. The plays didn't make her happy, the opera didn't interest her.
Her continued sadness started to affect her health. She became frail and ill, and the beast became worried. Eventually he begged to know what was wrong, and she told him, at which he sank into his own despair, asking what more he could possibly have done for her to stop her from wanting to abandon him and break his heart.
Beauty rushed to reassure him. She didn't hate the beast, and she was so grateful for everything he had done for her, but she only wished to see her family one last time. Could he possibly spare her for only 2 months so she could be with them?
That's not one last time. That's 61 last times.
Yeah.
The beast lay dramatically on the nearby couch and sighed.
I mean, we don't know he actually lay dramatically on the couch, but I'm guessing he probably did.
Yeah, without a doubt. He couldn't refuse her anything, really, so of course she could go, though it would definitely cost him his life. He told her to go to the cabinet in her room, and in it she would find 4 chests. She was to fill those with whatever riches she desired. Then he gave her a beautiful jewelled ring.
Take this and wear it. When you do, think of me. Then on the day you wish to return, simply turn the ring around before you go to sleep, so the stone is against your palm. Then say, I wish to return to the palace and see my beast again. You will wake up back here with me, but take only the 2 months. Any longer, and I shall die.
Dun dun dun!
Beauty promised him that she would not take more than the time agreed with her family, and with words of thanks, she ran to her room to pack.
That night she saw her handsome man again, but he seemed sad. When she asked him what was wrong, he admissioned for her and asked her a question. When is it that she had doomed him to death? She promised him that she would not be away long. She assured him that she would take the beast if the man asked, She assured him that she would ask the beast if the man could be her escort, but the man said he could not agree to this.
When she awoke, she found herself in a strange room, nowhere near as fancy as the one she'd gone to bed in. She looked around the room and spied the 4 chests that she'd filled the night before. Getting out of bed, she left the room and came face to face with her family. After embracing fondly, her father took her to one side and asked what had happened to her since he left. He told her that when he'd arrived home, the horse that had carried the trunks they'd filled him with treasure had run away. So he never got the benefit of any of it. Instead, he only got to worry about what fate he had given his daughter over to.
He had gone into his bedroom and found the trunks, sitting there with the keys on top, which made him think, actually, this beast might be a decent kind of fellow after all. He had used the gifts to buy a new house, which Beauty had woken up in, and slaves to help with their work. We're not touching that particular faux pas.
No.
His daughters were due to be married off. His sons now lived a life of ease again. It was all coming up, father.
Beauty was happy for him and told him so, though she decided not to tell him that her visit was only temporary. He was too happy. He was making plans and everything, bless him.
Aww.
Instead, she told him everything that she'd seen and experienced at the palace, though she didn't tell him of her dreams. The man was so pleased with how she was being treated that he pressed her next time to accept the beast's proposal. She shouldn't be deceived by her eyes. He was clearly a good man, and she was 17 now, nearly. She was getting old. She might not meet another kindly beast man like him again. Gotta snap him up whilst you got the chance.
Right? Can you imagine if she didn't get to snap up a beast?
Exactly.
Beauty was having none of it, though. Sure, the beast was kind and all, but he was stupid and ugly, and their conversations were pretty one-sided. It was always the same questions, the same conversation with him. She couldn't do that for the rest of her life. Plus, she thought he wasn't the handsome man in her dreams. The father didn't give up, though. He was determined to see his daughter settled, and surely she could deal with poor conversation in return for a palace. I mean, come on. There were orange trees and everything. Did she know how hard it was to grow orange trees in this local soil?
2 years as a farmer, he thinks he knows everything.
Innit?
Yep. Beauty humoured his hints throughout the day as she sat and talked with her brothers, ignoring the looks from her sisters at her fine clothes. That night she closed her eyes, eager to see her lover. But he didn't appear. Nor did he the next night, or the next.
Now, friends of her family came round to visit after hearing of Beauty's return, and she charmed them all easily, being even more beautiful and kind than she had been when she left. It didn't help family dynamics, though. When the men engaged to her sisters all started to fall in love with her.
Whoops.
She tried her best to discourage them and get them to go back to her sisters, but jealousy had already sprouted. She enjoyed her time with her brothers and her sisters. She enjoyed her time with her brothers and her father, even talking to her sisters, even though she knew they hated her, was pleasant, but she found herself missing her nightly visitor.
No matter what she tried, he didn't appear in her dreams once. The men who were courting her sisters soon began to fight it out amongst themselves for Beauty's attentions, turning her sister's jealousy towards her into outright hatred. Beauty was devastated, and she determined to return to the beast sooner than planned, but her brother and father persuaded her to stay a little longer. Eventually the 2 months passed, but still Beauty did not return, persuaded by her brothers and father to stay a little longer still.
Then one night a dream did come. She dreamt she was walking along the palace gardens when she heard the beast call out to her. She ran to the sound of his voice and found him lying on the ground, dying. The beautiful fairy woman was there, and she scolded Beauty for failing to keep her word and urged her to return without delay.
When Beauty awoke, she told her family that she would have to leave. Her father and brothers were devastated and pleaded with her to stay. Her sisters, however, praised her sense of duty and how wonderful it was that she was going to keep her word, because it absolutely held no advantage to them or their suitors, who were absolutely heartbroken at having to go back to their consolation prizes.
Throughout the day, the brothers and suitors tried to think of ways to stop Beauty from going, even going as far as to sell the family horse. Nobody thought to remove the ring. That night, Beauty said her goodbyes and went to bed, turning the ring before she fell asleep.
She woke suddenly to the sound of a clock chiming, surrounded by the animal servants she remembered fondly. She dressed and went in search of the beast, desperate to beg his forgiveness for stretching the time away and breaking her word. In between thoughts of the beast, she thought on her handsome man and wondered if he would appear to her that night now that she had returned.
He was nowhere in the palace, so she decided to look through the grounds. As she walked, she recognised the grove from her dream of the night before. She rushed towards the spot where she had seen the beast lying in her dreams. The light was already fading by this point, and the monkey servants brought out torches to help her. The torchlight shone on the form of the beast, lying as though asleep on the ground ahead of her.
Beauty approached him, happy to see him, and called out to him several times, but he didn't stir. She placed a hand on his head, but it was cold and motionless. He was surely dead. Beauty cried out and placed her head on his chest. There was a heartbeat, but it was so very faint. Getting up quickly, Beauty ran to a nearby fountain, scooped up some of the cool water in her hands, and ran back to the beast. But she spilt most of it. The monkey servants had her back, though. 2 ran into the palace, returning a few moments later with a vase.
That makes more sense. Beauty filled the vase at the fountain and, returning to the beast, threw it over his head, startling him awake. I'm sorry, that's not what you want.
No. The book does also say that the monkeys, when they brought the vase out, they also brought out like smelling salts and everything that they were wafting under his nose as she chucked this water over him.
Jesus, poor dude. She fell to the floor beside him and embraced him. I didn't know, she said, how much I loved you. The fear I felt at nearly losing you made me realise I didn't feel gratitude towards you. Had you not woken up, I promise I would have laid down to die beside you.
They're so dramatic.
Isn't it?
The beast smiled feebly at her and promised that, as she loved him, he would try to live. Please, he asked her, leave me now and go to bed. When you wake, you will be as happy as your heart deserves to be. Beauty was reluctant to leave him, but she did as he asked, helping him to his feet before going inside and heading to bed.
No sooner had she fallen asleep that the handsome man appeared, saying how happy he was to see her back at the palace, and in order for her to be happy, she had to follow her heart. Beauty asked him if this meant marrying the beast, and the man agreed that it did. He faded as the fairy woman appeared, promising to Beauty that she would now work to make sure that Beauty would be happy. Beauty told the fairy that it was odd how the man which she loved encouraged her to marry another, and though she did love the beast, he was still a beast.
The fairy woman smiled and told her not to worry. What she felt for one wasn't going to cause problems with what she promised the other. All Beauty had to do was keep her word, and she would be happy. Beauty, incredibly confused as always, continued to sleep.
The next day, she woke and dressed, then decided to go down to the magic mirror room and watch an opera. The beast joined her and began to ask her how she had enjoyed her time with her family and asked about their health. They spoke for a while and then, as he always did, he asked her to marry him. And this time, Beauty said yes. Yay!
No sooner had the words left her lips than the sound of gunfire went off, followed by the sounds of hundreds of fireworks that lasted for 3 hours, forming intricate patterns in the sky, and the words, "Long live Beauty and her husband."
Aww.
When the fireworks had finally died down, the beast bid his now fiancée good night and left her for the night.
I guess Long Live Beauty and the Beast. You know, they should have named that. The Disney movie should have been Beauty and her husband.
Yep. That's a bit of a spoiler though.
As soon as she was asleep, the handsome man appeared, thanking Beauty for releasing him from his prison. Your marriage will return a king to his subjects, a son to his mother, and bring life back to a kingdom long dormant, he said. We will all be happy now. He was then joined by the fairy woman, who thanked Beauty for keeping her word, promising Beauty that she will now have everything when the sun rose.
She stirred, the sun dazzling through the window, and sat up. There, on the couch at the foot of her bed, lay the handsome man. I must still be dreaming, she thought. She pinched herself lightly, proving that she was, in fact, awake. Then it all fell into place. The dreams, the beast and the man, the words of the fairy woman. The beast was the man! Shocked pause. And they were now to be married!
Wow!
We had no idea!
She ran to her fiancé and tried to wake him, but he wouldn't stir. His skin was warm and his heart beat, but he seemed to be in a deep sleep. Nothing she tried would wake him.
Typical bloke.
The rest of the day she passed watching over him, waiting for him to wake, until, eventually, she heard the sound of a carriage approaching outside.
Beauty looked out of the window to see a beautiful carriage pulled by 4 white stags with hooves of gold. A monkey servant approached, accompanied by a parrot translator and a
Sorry, that sentence! Oh dear, sorry, go on.
They announced that there were some important ladies coming up to see Beauty, and sure enough, she could hear their voices and footsteps approaching.
She went to greet them, seeing the fairy woman from her dreams, accompanied by a taller, regal-looking woman that the fairy woman introduced as a queen, pointing out to her that the Beauty was the woman who had restored her son from his curse. The queen instantly gave her consent to the match and embraced Beauty as her future daughter.
Beauty was overcome with shock, however, and professed her concern that she, a humble merchant's daughter, should be married to an actual prince. The queen seemed to share her concerns, and they both turned to the fairy woman. At that moment, the handsome not-beast appeared beside Beauty. The fairy explained to him his mother's objections. "It is all right, though," she said. "Beauty is of so good spirit that she would happily renounce the engagement if she asked. Wouldn't you, Beauty?" I'm guessing she said this with a lot of sarcasm. Beauty agreed that she would, as it was only from love and pity for the beast, not ambition, that she had agreed to marry him. If the fairy would be so kind as to return her to her family, she would no longer be an obstacle, but would remember the Beast Prince fondly. The Beast Prince threw himself at his mother's feet, pleading with her not to make him renounce his engagement, not after he asked her every night for years.
This was the perfect response as it embarrassed the queen, but she wouldn't change her mind. So the fairy played her trump card and revealed the real secret of Beauty's birth. "Behold," she told the queen, "for all your pride and prejudices against low birth, the odds are actually in Beauty's favour, because standing before you is your own niece and mine. Her mother married your brother, the king of the Fortunate Land."
What? What?
"The king of the Fortunate Island. You won't find it on a map, so you don't look. Don't look! You won't see it, so don't try and look. Okay? Don't look. You won't see it."
No.
She added as an aside to the bewildered monkey servants nearby, "I promised you from her birth that she would marry your son, but I had to take steps to protect her, and well, here she is."
The queen was shocked and started to backtrack furiously, apologising to Beauty for her previous behaviour. The fairy woman decided the time had come to leave the lovebirds together and, taking the love parrots, and taking the queen by the arm, she said she would show her around the beautiful palace that she used to own. Anyway, now turning to his love, the Beast Prince felt it was time to explain.
Yeah, maybe. Cutting a long bit of exposition short,
Like 3 whole long chapters, the longest chapters in the book.
the Beast Prince had lost his father when he was young, making him actually the Beast King. His mother ruled as regent from the help of her fairy tutor to educate the king. Not the same fairy as earlier, an older fairy.
Okay.
But nearby, a kingdom invaded, so his mother went to war, promising not to sheath her sword until all her son's enemies were vanquished.
That's a cool promise. I appreciate that promise.
I do.
Over time, the king grew into a handsome young man, still under the tutelage of the old fairy. But his changes didn't escape her notice, and she became attracted to him.
Oh.
Gross. One day, the fairy stated that the king needed to marry her. That was the only way he could be protected. It was to become the husband of a powerful fairy. He refused and said the only thing he wanted was to see his mother again and help her in defence of his kingdom. The fairy wasn't happy, but she agreed to let him see his mother, but only if she went with him. So they set off together, and with the queen they were able to defeat the enemy and return victorious.
But the old fairy told the queen of her plans to marry the young king. Needless to say, this didn't go down well, and the queen forbade the marriage of her handsome young son to this ugly old crone of a fairy. So the fairy took revenge. It was her son's looks that blinded her, so she would remove what she admired most about the king and render him a beast, both in looks and in intellect. She trapped him in the body of a monster, cursing him to stay that way until someone could love him for who he was, because who could ever learn to love a beast?
Sorry, I had to get in there.
I love it.
This is where the good fairy comes in. Beauty's aunt, as she appeared when she was needed most, and sealed the palace in a spell, meaning only those meant to find it could do so, freezing every living creature in the palace into a statue to preserve them from time. The queen was forced to leave as the kingdom was still in need of a ruler. So the only company the beast had was when the good fairy visited to pass him news of his mother and his people, and that is how Beauty and her foster father had found him.
He had led Beauty fall in love with him without ever openly declaring the form she saw in her dreams to be the real man behind the beast, though, Let's face it, he did everything but spell it out for her.
Yep. But fall in love she had, and so the spell was broken. The statues returned to life, and the kingdom once again had its king and a beautiful young queen to boot, and they lived happily ever after.
Now, there is a lot more exposition in the original story involving the appearance of Beauty's real father, the King of the Fortunate Lands, but it doesn't really add much to the tale at that point, so we would encourage you to read it for yourselves.
In the revised version by Beaumont, the one where she doesn't give any credit to Villeneuve, Beauty only has 2 brothers and 2 sisters instead of 5 and 6. And the 2 sisters are the ones that make Beauty stay longer. And because of their spite, the good fairy turns them into statues and basically says, until you learn to be good people and learn to love yourselves properly instead of be proud of yourselves, you will remain statues forever.
Wow.
Yeah, there's always this punishment idea for the sisters. I mean, and sometimes the punishments are really dark.
Mm-hmm.
So, that's the story of Beauty and the Beast. A bit different to the one we know, right?
A bit, yeah.
Yeah, there's some similar themes through there, but there are some notable differences.
It was believed that it was based partially on a true story, though there was no magic curse or headstrong feminine, and certainly no elephant trunk.
Yeah. Instead, there was a man named Petrus Gonsalves who suffered from hypertrichosis, an abnormal excessive hair growth on part of the body. In his case, it was all over his body, and it basically gave him the appearance of a stereotypical wolf or beast. Have you seen the Michael J. Fox werewolf movie?
No.
In that, he has hypertrichosis. He's basically called a wolf man or a wolf boy, but he has hypertrichosis in that he has hair all over his body.
Like Wolf Boy in Greatest Showman?
Yeah, basically that is hypertrichosis.
Yeah.
So,
in France in the 1500s, he met a young woman named Catherine and they married. He wasn't a prince, though he did have connections to royalty. Gonsalves was born on the island of Tenerife in the Canary Islands and was very badly treated.
Yeah, so it wasn't that, he met and it was all love and happily ever after. So this is the story of Gonsalves. He was kept in an iron cage as a wild man, and he was given raw meat and animal feed to eat. He was then given as a coronation gift to Henry II of France in 1547.
Henry II was kind to Gonsalves and released him from his cage with the hopes of educating him and making him into what was considered a gentleman at the time. He was taught to read and write and spoke 3 languages.
When Henry II was killed in a jousting match in 1559, Gonsalves passed in ownership, he was still seen as less than human, to Henry's widow, Catherine de Medici, who wondered what would happen if the beast married a beauty. She found the daughter of a royal servant, a lady called Catherine, and arranged the marriage. Also, please, can we at some point do Catherine de Medici?
Okay.
Fascinating woman. Great with poisons. Anyway.
They met for the first time on their wedding day, and things seemed to work. They went on to have 7 children, 4 of whom inherited the condition of hypertrichosis. They travelled Europe and eventually settled in Italy, where they worked for Duke
Ranuccio Farnese,
who commissioned several portraits of the couple, which is how we can see them today. The portraits included the affected children, but not the unaffected children.
Yeah, so they were still being treated as a spectacle. So you'd have the father, the wife, so the Beauty and the Beast, and their kids, but not the kids that didn't have hypertrichosis. Unfortunately, Gonsalves was still seen as less than human, as were his affected children, and the Duke gave the children away as gifts, pets for the upper-class friends of the Duke.
Gonsalves and Catherine stayed married for over 40 years until his death in around 1618, with Catherine passing 7 years later. We don't have an exact record of his death. As we said, he was not really viewed as a human and didn't therefore have a proper Christian burial. We know he was at his grandson's christening in 1617, so it's guessed he died the following year.
Hypertrichosis is something that we are still aware of today, and it affects approximately 1 person in 50.
That's quite a lot, really.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it can be hidden beneath clothes, but in like Petrus Gonsalves' case, it couldn't be.
Yeah.
It was very, very visible. And we will include a portrait or an image of one of the portraits. It doesn't make anyone lesser than anyone else. They're still human. It just means that they have to go through shampoo a little faster.
But it's that thing, isn't it?
So someone was different, so somehow they're lesser.
Yeah.
It's disgusting.
And they couldn't explain it, especially back then.
giving the kids away as gifts.
That is
come on.
Horrendous.
I know we're supposed to be objective and it's like it's different time, different attitudes,
Yeah.
but they were kids, man. Come on.
Yeah. And all they were they had a generic
Genetic
condition.
Yeah.
Thank you.
a generic genetic condition. Yeah, they didn't exactly win the birth lottery. They had no control over it whatsoever.
No. So that's Beauty and the Beast.
What did you think?
I mean, it actually has a lot more similarities to the Disney version, because obviously we've done a few of these now. We've done Cinderella or Ashputtel, called If the Shoe Fits.
Woo.
We did Pinocchio, which is Not the Story You Knows,
or The Haunting He-Haws.
and we've done The Little Mermaid.
Yep.
Don't Kiss the Girl. And they have all been quite different to the Disney version.
They have, and usually a lot darker.
Yeah, but this one, I feel the Disney version actually kept quite to it.
Yeah, it did.
In a way, she still, was the one who had to leave her family.
Yeah.
Her dad. I mean, in the Disney version, she's an only child. That's probably the biggest difference, really.
Yeah, although she still has just one father, because we don't know what happened to her mother.
You find out in the second Disney movie, the Emma Watson one.
But in this one, you kind of...
The plague.
You read the exposition, and I think there is something in there about her mother, but it changes differently. Like some versions don't mention her mother, it's just always the father. And you'll find a lot of times in fairy tales, there's either a wicked stepmother, or there is no mother, or there is no father. There's one
Yeah, to be a Disney princess, you can't have two parents.
Exactly. Except Moana does it. Moana just loses a grandparent.
Yeah. Still devastating trauma. But yeah, I feel like that actually stuck to the Disney movie.
Yeah.
Well, the Disney movie stuck to the original quite well.
And there's an idea that, obviously the Disney version now, she's the captive, she falls in love with him. It's this whole idea of Stockholm Syndrome, which is where you fall in love with it. Apparently they're not calling it that anymore. I don't know what they're calling it now. But you fall in love with your captive, or you learn to identify with your captor.
Yeah.
But also there's that element of, back when this was written, women were property. They didn't really have much control over their lives. And it's this idea that an arranged marriage could be scary, and you don't know what you're going into with your husband. He could be a beastly man. So it's learning to accept your circumstances and know that you can make the best out of it. So like Belle would wander around the palace and she'd make the best out of it.
Yeah.
Or if you're lucky, you could in time come to love that person.
Yeah.
And then live happily. So either you live content in what you've got, or you learn to love and live happily. And just basically deal with it and make the best out of it. Which isn't the best message, but I understand how it was the best message for girls to have at the time.
Yeah. And I guess in the Disney version as well, the Beast is a dick.
Yes.
A lot. And it does show Belle as being quite strong, because she stands up to him, like the whole, you've got to learn to control your temper. Like, it shows that she is strong, that she's not taking his shit, that,
But he's quite insecure in the Disney version, isn't it?
Yeah.
In this bit, he's like, he knows that he's a handsome man, and he goes and visits her, and he knows that she falls for that. He's just like, don't be fooled by appearances.
Yeah.
But in the Disney version, he hasn't seen himself since he was a teenager.
No, and he's very insecure, because he kind of gets it into his head that nobody could ever learn to love a beast, like you said.
Yeah.
So he's like, no one's going to love me, I'm going to die when this last petal falls, so what's the point?
And that moment, the one moment in both versions, the animated and the live action version, that gets me right in the feels, is when Cogsworth runs in and tells him, encroachers, invaders, in the castle, and he's like, it's fine, let them come. Because she's gone. She was his last hope, and she couldn't love him. No one can love him. If a girl that good and that not focused on looks couldn't love him,
innocent,
then he might as well die. There's nothing else for him.
Yeah.
And that moment is just like, oh, you poor thing.
Yeah, and where's Gaston in the movie? Where's Gaston in the original version?
I think Gaston was a later addition to be like what was expected by society. What society said, this is what you should want. This is what any normal girl would want, the rough, tough man. But I think it's really interesting how nuanced Disney made him, because actually, he's the Beast.
Yeah, and isn't there that line that they added, in the song, Just the Beast? Isn't it like, Yeah, there's a monster.
There's a beast running wild, there's no question.
I fear the real monster's released. Yeah.
LeFou,
that is so
Josh
clever.
Gad just nailed that role. Absolutely nailed it.
But that is just so clever because it's basically saying you've got this ugly society with Dean, this ugly, this horrible, this beast of a man, and this gorgeous, this stunning, this Luke Evans hunk is the one you're supposed to love.
Yeah.
But
he's arrogant,
actually he's an arsehole.
Yeah, he's completely wrong for her. And it's like, oh, I don't get what this book is, and oh, you have your own mind, oh, that's sweet, you can raise our kids, it's fine. I see loads of children around us, and the beast just like, please just love me.
Yeah, and gives her a library.
Yes.
So rather than being like, don't read, he's like, here, read thousands of books.
The thing is, I would actually probably accidentally stumble into a marriage that way if a man just gave me a library and I'd just be standing there reading, be like, you marry me? Uh-huh. Next page. Oh, yeah, sure.
I quite like a library that has ladders.
Yes. Oh, and those ladders on wheels where you can just whiz from one to the other and just let your
I wouldn't do that because I'm clumsy. I'd probably fall or stub.
Yes, you would. And have you ever seen the film The Mummy?
Yeah.
You know in the opening sequence when Evie's up the ladder and then she knocks all of the shelves down? Yep.
That would literally be me.
Yep.
But yeah, I like that. I mean, it's not very good for women. It's quite anti-feminist, I would say. Women are only supposed to be married and stuff. But I think if you look at the actual the story or the actual moral of it, don't judge a book by its cover, don't go by appearances. Doesn't matter what you have, as long as you're happy, you don't have to be rich. The storylines in that, it's still really prevalent today.
And considering the author, you know, she was in a marriage that she wasn't particularly happy with. He squandered all her money. She didn't have anything, so she found a man she loved. She made the best of what she had for the rest of her life, and it worked for her. And she has this heroine that's doing exactly that. She's making the best of what she's got, but it does work out well for her.
Yeah, and this was written back in the 1600s, so like...
Yeah, but the story of Beauty and the Beast, that dynamic has been around for a long, long time.
Yeah, but it shows that even then, women were like, stop thinking we're only good for marriage and children.
Yeah, there's more to us.
Yeah.
We cook well. Some of us do.
So, Beauty and the Beast.
Yes. I enjoyed that. I was happy to do that.
I'm glad. That was a good opener of season 3.
Yeah, it was.
And next, in a fortnight, we're actually sticking down the Disney line.
We are indeed.
I'm so excited. I've wanted to do this one for a very long time.
And considering it's almost 3 years to the day since we did Mickey Mouse, I think it's really fitting.
It is. I mean, obviously there's bits about him that isn't so great, but I'm so excited.
If you hadn't guessed, we're going to talk about Walt Disney.
Yeah, we are.
And being historians, we're not going to skimp from the bad parts.
Well, no, we did the same with the Prince Philip episode and stuff.
But sometimes, what is it that to quote Beauty and the Beast, the song that Celine Dion did in the live action, How Can a Moment Last Forever, sometimes you have to have some bad times to make the good times seem worth it. So sometimes you have to have some bad parts of a personality to make the good parts seem worth it.
Mm-hmm. Everyone has light and dark inside of them. It's just the part which you choose to act on that shows who we really are. I got Harry Potter into it! I have a very special talent. Oh dear. Disney, should we do a ridiculous death now, dude?
Yes, ridiculous death. So we wanted to do something themed, so it is a
animal.
Death, yeah.
Is it a death caused by an animal?
Yeah, I mean technically it's a beast, but it's a beast in the literal sense of the word, as in an animal.
Yeah. So, you know you said in the beginning bit, you gave a little hint.
Yes.
You know when you're drunk?
Yes.
You have obviously certain drunks that just cry, certain drunks that can get angry, certain drunks that get hyper.
I like to have a debate. When I'm drunk, I like
get
to debate.
Really giggly.
You do. You live your best life when you are drunk. It's so funny. You literally, on our 30th birthday, you were dressed as a Hufflepuff, and you ran up to me and you went, "I'm so drunk, but I'm loving it." And then waved your wand at me and ran off again. I was like, okay.
And on Halloween as well.
Yeah. Yeah,
When I
Halloween.
was
You
running
can
around
agree-
being a pirate.
And
With
apparently agreed to a New Year's party that you do not remember agreeing to.
No, but it's happening.
Yeah.
This New Year's Eve party is happening.
In fairness, like Beauty, you kept your word.
I did. And I am beautiful.
You are indeed.
I am. But yeah, so and then some are huggers.
Yes.
You want to hug everybody.
Yes.
And that's fine when you're a human.
But
not so much if you're a bear. Now, quick quiz for you, dude.
Yes.
You're offered a bear to keep as a pet. Do you A, turn it down because it's cruel to keep a bear as a pet? Or do you B, accept it? Perhaps you might teach it to drink booze.
I mean, personally, I'd say A, but I think for the purposes of this, we're going to go with B.
So, in Vilna, which is now Vilnius, in Russia, apologies if I said that wrong, in 1891, there was a man who answered B. This bear was huge, large, ginormous, but was tame, and had a taste for vodka.
Russian bear.
One day, it bustled into a village tavern and just grabbed a keg of vodka. Imagine being in that pub and a beer comes in, it's like, right mate, and just takes the vodka.
I mean, it's just being that pub landlord, just like, what is happening today? What have I just drunk?
Yep. The owner of the inn was an Isaac Rabinovich. Again, apologies if I've said that wrong. He objected to this and he tried to snatch it back. And it would be an understatement to say that this was an error.
It did not go well.
In chaotic scenes that ensued, the infuriated animal decided that he wanted a hug, and he hugged to death the tavern keeper. He then drank the keg of vodka and did the same thing to his 2 sons and daughter. The villagers found the drunken animal asleep on the floor in a pool of blood and alcohol, surrounded by his victims.
That took a really bad turn.
So this drunk bear, walked into a bar, stole some vodka, and hugged 4 people to death.
He basically, in a drunken stupor of "I love you, man," wiped out an entire family.
Yep.
I mean, I've been there. I love the place. It's a fascinating place full of history, but only in Russia.
Yeah, the drunk bear. I just would love to have been in that pub and the bear wandered in and grabbed vodka.
I mean, at that point, you would suspiciously sniff your mug to see what was in there.
Yeah. Or I'd slap myself out. Am I dead? What is happening?
This good stuff.
But yeah, we only have the name of the innkeeper. But yeah, so...
Wow.
And I have to say that the bear was immediately shot by police when they came in and saw that he'd killed a whole family.
See, now I feel bad because that makes me more sad than hugging a family to death. I think that says more about me than it does
He was happy and drunk. He would have just died.
Would have been quick, hopefully.
Yeah, it was. But yeah, so the last thing this bear did was walk into a bar and steal a keg of vodka and have some cuddles.
He just wanted a drink and a hug.
Mm-hmm.
He was clearly having a bad bear day.
But it's not like he slashed anyone to death. It wouldn't have been horrible. It just would have been a bit choky. Oh dear. I'm sorry.
A bit choky. Oh my god.
Oh, you're awake now, Dudley. Dudley's been asleep this whole time.
With a cushion on top of him because
you're
that's how
awake
he
now.
rolls. Right, we are going to say goodbye before he starts to bark, or snore, or dribble, or do anything that a dog does.
He's just cute right now.
He wasn't cute an hour ago when you wafted your pillow around.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening. I can't believe we're on season 3 already.
I can't believe we're on over 3,500 listens. That's
and
insane.
And the fact when you look at all the listens and you see that it's completely globally, that blows my mind.
Hello around the world. I would say hello in different languages, but I genuinely don't want to embarrass myself. So
yeah, I mean, you probably do all right.
I probably get some of them, but yeah, I don't want to risk it.
Yeah. If you want to request a show, then please do get in touch. Our email address is cupofhistory@outlook.com.
That's all it is. cupofhistory@outlook.com.
Yep, and all of our handles are the same on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook @cupofhistory.
Yeah, we would be overjoyed. We have done a request before, and we would love to do them again.
Yep.
Yeah.
But on that note, I will say goodbye and we'll speak with you in a couple of weeks.
See you later.
Bye.